what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode, is it 16? Yes, episode 16 of Monster Kid Radio, the podcast where we celebrate the classic and sometimes not so classic, the genre cinema of yesteryear. I'm your producer and host, Derek M. Cook, and I want to welcome you to the show. This is part 2 of our chat with Joe Stuber about his favorite comedy of all time, and one of my favorites too, I think, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. And the boys are mixing it up with our favorite monsters, a Universal production, and man, it is so good. In this chat, I had a lot of fun dealing with Joe. Now, Joe is one of the co-hosts of the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones segment of the IndieCast, the premier Indiana Jones podcast. You can find the IndieCast at theindiecast.com. They've also got a Facebook group, as does the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. You'll look them up on Facebook. Tell them Monster Kid Radio sent you. If you like what Joe had to say, let them know over there, or let us know by emailing us at monsterkidradio@gmail.com or calling our voicemail line, which is 503-479-5MKR. Now, in part 2 of our chat, we're going to talk a little bit about the performances and the characters that are outside of the Abbott and Costello and monster categories in this film. We're going to talk about the women. We're going to talk about the leading man that was thrown into the mix for, well, who knows what reason, really. And we're going to talk about the fantastic ending of the film. Actually, this film has a couple of fantastic endings. We're going to talk about them all here in this chat. Big thanks to Joe for taking the time to talk with me here on Monster Kid Radio. This was actually the very first recording session I'd ever done for this podcast. We recorded this many, many months ago, before I even launched the show. So, Joe, you were part of a grand experiment to see if something like this would work. I found it entertaining. I hope you guys and gals find it entertaining as well. And I hope you were entertained by the opening music, the song Footprint from the Retroactive Gamma Rays. The song appears by permission of the band. It is from their album Activate, and you'll hear it in its entirety at the end of the show. All right, let's get on to part 2 of the chat with Joe Stuber about the Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein right after this.
Tired of going to lame comic cons and sitting around with smelly, moldy comic book boxes and the odor of really creepy cosplayers? Well, you don't have to go there anymore. Connecticut Comic Con with 2 N's is back on August 24th, 2013 at the Marriott Hotel in Trumbull, Connecticut.
Join us at Connecticut Comic Con and be part of the coolest con in the entire Northeast.
Toys, collectibles, sci-fi, cosplay contest, all at Connecticut Comic Con! August 24th, Trumbull Marriott has an all-star lineup of comic creators: Mark Bagley, Ron Garney, Tom Palmer, Billy Tucci, Chris Giarrusso, Joe Staten, Tom DeFalco, and many more surprises. From stormtroopers to Batmobiles, Batcycles to land speeders, they'll all be there at Connecticut Comic Con, August 24th, Trumbull Marriott. Looking for that rare action figure? You'll find it at Connecticut Comic Con. Looking for that comic book to complete your collection? You'll find it at Connecticut Comic Con. Want a piece of original artwork to hang on the wall? You'll find it at Connecticut Comic Con. Want to dress up and hang out with your cosplaying friends? You'll find it. Where? At Connecticut Comic Con.
Connecticut Comic Con. It is your destiny.
So join us and be part of the fun at Connecticut Comic Con, Saturday, August 24th, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Marriott Hotel in lovely Trumbull, Connecticut. More details can be found at www.comiccon.com. Join us. It's sure to be another crowd pleaser. Connecticut Comic Con!
Well, you mentioned the actresses, the 2 women earlier, and we haven't talked about them. I wanted to get your read off of them. You got Sandra Mornay and Joan Raymond, played by Lenore Albert and Jane Randolph, respectively. What did you think of our 2, I guess, leading ladies? One's definitely a femme fatale type.
Yeah. Oh, they're both using Costello, but yeah, one's a good girl, one's a bad girl. So it's I thought they were great. I mean, first of all, they're stunning, which you find that in every Abbott and Costello film. I mean, they really cast pretty well. But I just thought there's a lot more depth to these characters in this one. I mean, the only one that really doesn't is was it Stevens? Was that the lab assistant, Sandra's assistant?
Yeah, and he's the one that kind of sticks out for me as kind of not really belonging. You know, one of these things is not like the other.
He's a plot point. I mean, he's kind of a throwaway character in it. But I thought that the two actresses were great. I mean, they, especially Lenore Albert, who played Sandra.
Oh yeah,
I thought she was fantastic in it because it's almost like two different characters when she's coming on to Costello and trying to manipulate him, and then all of a sudden there's this whole sinister thing that comes. You're like, oh, she's in with Dracula. Okay. And then it just gets really creepy at the end when she is under a spell, and then he bites her and she becomes a vampire as well. So you've got that. But yeah, I thought Jane Randolph was great as well as the insurance agent. I thought she was a lot smarter than Stevens. Much better character.
That's true. Yeah. So I would want to know, though, what was in it for Mornay? What was in it for her before she gets bit by Dracula? She's on board with helping Dracula out. Did he promise her something? Was she going to be...
I got that they were kind of using each other. I mean, I think he had the monster, she had the know-how. And I think they both want it, whatever it is, they want to control the monster. And I think she has Frankenstein's formula. So, but he needs her to be able to do... He can't do the surgery, so he needs her to do that. He's got the monster, and he's been able to control it with that little ring or the little device to get him from point A to point B. So I think they're just kind of using each other. Unfortunately, what she doesn't get is he's Dracula.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be a doctor and femme fatale and have all... But seriously? Really? You're dealing with Dracula. It's
Dracula.
Yeah,
haven't you seen the previous movies? Come on. You know how this ends.
Look, Costello knows who he is.
Yeah.
This is not going to go well for you.
There is a moment when...
It's like, and you're gone.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, that's how, once he looks into your eyes, that's it. She's gone.
There is a moment right when he does finally bite her. First of all, it's probably where the most glaring film flub in this whole thing is it's in front of a mirror and you see him. Yeah. You see his reflection, which is unfortunate. I'm sure they weren't really thinking about it at the time.
Yeah, it happened in one of the other Dracula movies too, didn't it? Or one of the other sequels. I think.
It might have happened, but like there's that moment in the very first film when Van Helsing shows the mirror and you don't see the reflection, so it kind of establishes that it's something to look for, but you see it and whatever. I mean, we kind of move on. But what you do see in the reflection is Mornay enjoying it. There's this look of bliss, and she kind of gets this smile on her face as she's being bit by Dracula. I'm like, man, that's...
more than your typical Abbott and Costello film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't see that in many of the other ones. So, yeah, there's another element. But again, they're taking this very seriously. That's what I love about the script, is that it's bouncing back. When it's in horror, it's in horror. When it's in comedy, it's in comedy. And so they take both seriously.
Definitely. I also like the two women quite a bit. And you mentioned Stevens. He just really kind of stuck out as he's there.
Yeah, there's a lot of those characters in Abbott and Costello. Because obviously, with Abbott and Costello, it's about them. And then there's kind of a plot that goes around, and there's these other characters, and there's usually a guy and a girl, and they fall in love, and then Abbott and Costello do their wackiness. But yeah, this one is really kind of lame. To me, he's the only weak point of the film.
Right. Fortunately, he doesn't have much to do, so we don't have to sit through him too much. But
no, not until the very end. But yeah, it's just I mean, he's there. I think he's almost maybe a little bit of exposition. Like he's there for some exposition. He's there to kind of say what we're thinking, or to gather some information that wouldn't typically be spoken.
That's true, yeah, because by the time he becomes relatively important, both Abbott and Costello are both on board with believing there are monsters there. So we kind of need that one. I don't know. I don't know.
He's a plot. He helps them out, and I think he's there just to. But I think that could have been handled by Jane Randolph's character. I think a lot of that could have been handled. So, but yeah, again, I think in the castle scenes when they're trying to explain why they're trying to get Costello's brain and all these different things, I think there's some of that you need him there for. It's probably just a scripting thing.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we really, it wouldn't make sense for him to say this out loud or to her, so let's just drop this other character. Plus you need a guy, the handsome actor, the chiseled, good looks. It's missing that. So They put him in there for that.
Are you saying Lou Costello didn't bring that? We needed.
Well, Bud is rather handsome. I mean, you look at some of their early films too. I mean, he could have easily been a leading man.
Yeah, I could see that.
But that's thank goodness he didn't.
No kidding. We wouldn't have had movies like this.
Could you imagine? I mean, we wouldn't have had 36 Abbott and Costello features if those two had not gotten together. I mean, it's just that would have been awful. So thank goodness they found each other.
So you're more familiar with the Abbott and Costello filmography than I am. After this film and after the Meet the Monsters, I mean, is that pretty much what they did at this point? Were just the Meet the Monster types, or did they do other non-horror, non-monster type comedies as well?
It was a good mix. I mean, they kind of mixed it up a little bit. I mean, this definitely rejuvenated their career and rejuvenated interest. They were sort of off the box office radar, and this, I think, brought them back to like number 3 in the box office world. But yeah, they had, let's see, it was Meet Frankenstein. I'm just looking at their list here. You know, they went to Mexican Hayride, Africa Screams, and then they went to Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff, which at that point, Boris Karloff, I'm sure after the success of this film, was like, oh, this isn't too bad. Let me do 2 films with these guys. Because he did that, and then he also did Jekyll and Hyde. But yeah, you had Invisible Man, but then they did Coming Around the Mountain, Jack and the Beanstalk, Lost in Alaska. So Go to Mars, you know, that was a crazy one. Keystone Cops. But yeah, you're definitely kind of winding down at this point, but the best of the lot were the Meet the Monster movies. I mean, those were the coolest ones.
You know, we talked earlier, do we consider this part of the franchise, that sort of thing? There's a novel out there by Jeff Rovin called Return of the Wolfman. It is currently out of print. It came out in the late 90s, and it was licensed by Universal. And it was basically written as a sequel to this film, as well as all the other Universal monster movies as well, except it was set in then modern day. And it picks up almost immediately after Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, brings them up to modern day, and then kind of explains what happened to the Abbott and Costello characters. And I thought it was very well done in that, you know, the author says that because of their experiences, Wilbur and Chick changed their name and went somewhere else. And and kind of implies that all the other Abbott and Costello Meet movies are the same characters. They just had such traumatizing experiences. They changed their name, moved somewhere else, and started over again, and then ran into another monster. So,
you know, I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. Are their character names even?
They're just briefly mentioned as Wilbur and Chick, and that's it. You know, so it's not their story. It's really more about the Wolfman and Dracula and Frankenstein. And like I said, the novel's out of print, but if you can get your hands on it, I recommend it. I thought it was a great read. Okay. It did spawn 2 sequels that are not nearly as good. Okay. In fact, they're pretty terrible. But I do like the idea of just bringing all the Universal monsters together. In fact, at one point they mentioned how the creature from the Black Lagoon might have been seen in a swamp somewhere. So they kind of grab that and bring that in. So. Yeah,
I'm just looking over some of the notes for some of the subsequent films, and it's like even Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff. They're called Casey Edwards and Freddie Phillips. So yeah. So all this traumatization, and it's going to change. Hey, speaking of names, one other thing I want to ask about: Wolfman. 2 words, 1 word.
As a title, I've seen it as 2 words, so that's how I've always written it and seen it.
Okay, because in the opening titles to this movie, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, it's 1 word.
Do they put it together?
Yeah, they put it together as 1 word.
Huh.
Yeah, because I actually have it up here while we're talking about it. Just kind of referencing as we're going through, but it's like he gets top billing. So yeah, Lon Chaney, the Wolfman, 1 word.
Of all the people playing it straight and taking it serious, Lon Chaney Jr. seems to be the one taking the most serious out of all of them. I mean, he just seems like he's so down. He's tired of living with this curse, and he's so exhausted. I can't watch those scenes without feeling for the guy.
Well, he's got like 4 or 5 full moons consecutively every month. I mean,
this is true. That would take a lot out of you, I suppose.
What is up with? I mean, I love the movie. It's one of my favorites of all times. But really, that many full moons in a row?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it happens 2-3 times in this film alone, right?
I think, yeah, it's a bunch. Yeah. So he kind of keeps going through this. The poor guy. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting as well. But yeah, he does. But I don't know. And again, it's not important to the plot, but it's like he's kind of trying to warn Abbott and Costello or whoever gets these packages, McDougal or whoever ends up with these, that these monsters can't get together. There's something bad is going to happen of this, and the film actually even opens with him in London,
Right.
And he's trying to call. I thought it was another cool thing where they're like, hey, it takes time to call from London to the States. It's like, wow, whole different world back then.
That it was.
He's like trying to get a hold of them, and that's a great scene where he actually gets Costello on the phone, and he's trying to explain this to him as the full moon hits. And so he becomes the Wolfman on the phone. Costello's like, you're going to have to get your dog off the phone. And Costello starts barking at him. That is, I'm sorry. If you can't laugh at that, you don't have a pulse. That's a great scene. When he's just barking into the phone.
There's comedy there, too. There's comedy, definitely. But if you watch the scene from, Talbot's point of view, as he's talking on the phone, you can see the light, the moonlight from the blinds creeping up the wall as he's speaking. Yeah, so there's this sense of dread, this tension coming, and then it's released with the barking on the phone.
Yeah. It's just there's so many jokes that they're able to make off of that. And it's funny too when he eventually does meet up with Costello and he is the Wolfman. Just how slow he moves through he's like stalking him. Instead of this, and then all of a sudden, as Costello is able to exit the door, then he just becomes this rampaging Wolfman again.
He did seem to hold back a little bit, like he getting a little long in the tooth there. Maybe he's just tired.
Yeah, or maybe he didn't want to hurt. Maybe that was Talbot coming through and didn't want to hurt Lou, but he still wanted to trash something. So maybe you've got that coming into play.
But we'll go with that.
Yeah, but great visuals. I mean, so many great sets in this. Yeah, I mean, you almost have I'm kind of looking at some of the scenes now with Talbot, with Lon Chaney as Talbot, and just that film noir kind of look, all the the dark shadows and the lights, and boy, this just visually, this is a stunning film. It really is. So much more than your typical Abbott and Costello film. Agreed.
Now, it was just released on Blu-ray mid-2012 in August. Do you have it on Blu yet?
No, I don't have it on Blu yet. I watched. I have the DVD, the box set, Best of Abbott and Costello. It's on Volume 3, but there's actually a really cool, before I forget, there's actually on Volume 4 of that series, there are several documentaries. One of them is Abbott and Costello Meet the Monsters. So, I mean, go out and I don't know if that's on the Blu-ray or not.
I believe it is.
Oh, is it? Well, get the Blu-ray then, because that is a great documentary. It shows all those behind-the-scenes clips where, they're Strange breaks up on the set. Lou sits on his lap and he gets his hand, and you can see this smile crack a little bit on the monster's face, and a lot of those great behind-the-scenes shots that we're talking about. So, yeah, really go out and get that. But how does the blue look? I mean, I just had the upconvert. I watched the DVD on a Blu-ray player, and
they didn't do a huge restoration, nothing like what Universal did with their release earlier this year or in 2012. And there's really not a lot of extra special features. I mean, you've got the commentary from Greg Mank, which I believe is on the DVD as well, and then that Meet the Monsters. But that's about it. I mean, it looks good. I'm glad to have it.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's this huge step up outside of just the typical upconverting.
Okay. So wait and get a cheaper version or get it off the... I thought the DVD on a Blu-ray player looked great. I mean, I watched it this week, and I thought it looked really, really good.
Definitely. So. Now, I didn't watch the Meet the Monsters documentary recently. Is there footage out there of the accident that broke Glenn Strange's ankle?
No, and I got two different versions of that, because that's for anybody who hasn't seen it or wants to watch it again for the first time, we'd see all these different things. But Lon Chaney plays the monster. If you watch at the end of the movie when Sandra goes, and again, a lot of dark moments at the end here, the deaths, and he picks her up and throws her out of the lab window. Mm-hmm. Apparently I got one story was that he tripped on a cord or one of the cables for the camera, and the other one was that they threw the stunt woman out, and then the glass didn't break, and she kind of bounced back and knocked him into one of the cables or something. But regardless of anything, he broke his ankle or twisted his ankle on the set, and so couldn't shoot that scene for a while. So that's actually Lon Chaney as the monster throwing her out the window, and he whips around, and you could tell it's him.
Yeah.
And shorter, looks different. But yeah, and unless you know that ahead of time, it's so fast. But that's actually him. He stepped in, because they all sort of played the monsters, different monsters, at different times. But
Chaney played the most. I mean, he was obviously the Wolfman, and then he also did Son of Dracula, and then 3 Mummy films. The only thing he didn't do was The Invisible Man or anything from the Creature films. So
yeah. So I mean, you've got that. So yeah, there was a mishap. But then I guess after a few days, Strange was able to come back in. So then it cuts to the other scene where he's chasing the boys through the castle, and that's all him.
Right.
And you get that great joke, too, where they're, like, blocking the door.
Yeah.
And you get the door opening the wrong way gag. Which, and the other thing was... Go ahead.
I mean, it's not... And I'm not trying to downplay it. Maybe it's the wrong word. It's not the most sophisticated of humor.
No.
But it's still brilliant comedy.
Yes. Yes. It's fun. It's Benny Hill at that point. I mean, they're just, it's Scooby-Doo, but it's good stuff. But I tell you, there's one scene where Strange punches through the door. The boys are on the other side of the door and he punches through one of them. If you look, he connects with Lou.
Yeah.
And they kept that take because Lou didn't want to be on the mark. I don't know if he missed the mark or wanted a better reaction or something, but he wasn't on his mark. And so when that fist comes through, he really connects. And the director kept the take. So we look at him, he really looks like he gets clocked, and he does.
Well, and that whole sequence at the end of the movie, it's just nonstop. I mean, you've got the antics with the boys and Frankenstein's monster, and it's almost as if you've switched channels if you're not paying attention, because as soon as they leave the screen, in comes Dracula and the Wolfman, doing their horror menacing thing back and forth, and it's scary. It's not comedy anymore. And then unless you consider Dracula throwing a flower vase at the Wolfman. And then, and then they leave the screen, and in come Abbott and Costello again, and now it's a comedy film, and it's just brilliantly paced.
Yeah, the choreography, everything, all the planning ahead of time. And again, the sets. We keep talking about the sets, but that's what I think makes it. When you get those just sort of big hallways, and you're in the lab, and the doors, and everything, and all the creatures are running around and everything. And yeah, it does go pure horror because there are some dark moments where Sandra's thrown to her death, and even the Wolfman when he takes Dracula out. He's in bat form at that point, but grabs him, leaps, snags out the window, death in the death below. It's crazy stuff. Well,
and then Frankenstein's monster's end is just stunning. When they set him on fire and he walks off and that was a long lingering shot of just this burning Frankenstein monster walking down the dock, and just, it's intense and it's scary, and
Stevens finally had something to do.
Yes.
Enough gas, really. Like, how much gasoline does he pour on that pier? 12 gallons.
Yeah.
He's like, and he's
well,
getting
enough
all
to
over
burn
himself.
the monster.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing. Did you, because Frankenstein, fire bad. Is he but he kind of goes toward it. Is he trying to get Stevens? He just doesn't get what's going on there? But yeah, he marches right into the fire.
It's a wonderful visual. It's horrible. You see this thing getting burned alive or unalive or whatever, but it's just a great, stunning visual that, this movie is filled with so many wonderful, dark moments. I think the director, Charles Barton, did a wonderful job of balancing, the horror with the comedy, and it's something that I enjoy watching. I'm going to probably watch it once a year now that I've got it, as part of my collection. I didn't have it on DVD before I picked it up on Blu-ray, so.
Yeah. No, it's, that's a great ending. A little, you've got the sort of statue Frankenstein, as they launch him into the flames, and they're grabbing sticks, on the feet. They're moving the feet with, rods and things, so it kind of walks through. But if you get a chance to watch that documentary, they talk about shooting that scene and how he collapses through the pier at the end, and some really cool stuff. So there's a lot that went into this. A lot was riding on it, and people loved it. It was such a huge success too at the box office.
Not bad for a movie that nobody really wanted to make, including Universal themselves. They weren't really too on, or Universal International at the time now. They weren't really too keen on the idea either. They wanted to make these classy pictures, but they got talked into it, and thankfully, it paid off because it's such a great movie. Yeah, and I think, too, at the time, I could be wrong in this, but we talked about how Abbott and Costello, it was kind of on the decline at that point, so something needed to, pardon the pun, bring new blood into the genre. Sorry. Did I just... Well, hey, look, if you can have Snuffleupagus, I can have that. That's true.
But, also the Universal Monsters franchise, too. That was... you had some lame sequels. How much life did that have in it? So
it was pretty much done. They hadn't made any of these movies for 3 years.
Yeah. So, it kind of helped both out.
It did. And it's such a good movie. And if you guys don't already have it or haven't seen it recently, listeners, please, you're missing out. You got to watch this again.
Oh, yeah. It is a true classic. And to me, again, it's my favorite comedy of all time. It's absolutely my favorite comedy of all time. But I think it's kind of like one of the, because we do the IndieCast and talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders is flawed. I mean, if you pull it apart, there's mistakes all through it.
Sure.
I mean, you see, when Indy, shoots the truck, shoots the driver in the truck and the truck flips over. You see the big telephone pole sticking out of the bottom of it. They flipped it over. There's a lot of gaffes and mistakes. There's guys smoking cigarettes and jeans and T-shirts walking behind him. And he's mourning the loss of Marion. So I mean,
people are eating flies. I mean,
the flies are going into people's house. That just always creeped me out as a kid. That's strange. But so it's a flawed film, but to me, it's a perfect film. It's the perfect film. And so I kind of look at Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein the same way, is that look, if you sit there and pick it apart, I mean, there's a flaw, Frankenstein's electrode comes off his neck at one point. He's like leans over and it pops off his neck. So, I mean, there's a lot of different flaws in it. But to me, it's a perfect film. It does what it needs to do. It's a perfect script. It's engaging. It does everything it sets out to do. And it's all these years later, we're still talking about it. And it's on Blu-ray, and people are seeing it in movie theaters. So it had to do something right.
Indeed. I mean, it's a great setup, and then once things start happening at the castle, it's just one hell of a ride.
And even the ending, we haven't even talked about the best part of the movie. That ending is crazy. It's the best ending to any Abbott and Costello movie, and one of the best endings of any movie ever. I mean, I'm sorry, I know that's might seem hyperbolic, but how great is it? Well, go ahead.
No, I want to know what you're talking about, because there's a couple of nice moments at the end. Are we talking about the very, very end?
Very, 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 very end, right before the credits roll, right before the boys jump right in the water.
We got to see another monster, right? Or maybe not see him.
They're sitting there talking, well, all the monsters are gone. We don't have to worry about that. And this cigarette just floats up in midair. And the Invisible Man has been in the boat the whole time waiting for them. And it's Vincent Price's voice. How great is that? And then all of a sudden, obviously, launches Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man years later. Not with Vincent Price, but...
Yeah, I mean, he was uncredited as Vincent Price was uncredited in the film, but he had done one of the Invisible Man films for Universal at least.
Yeah.
So to have him throw his voice in the mix... I mean, when are you going to have Price and Lugosi's presence in the same film?
Right. I mean, when you're sitting there watching, you go, I just saw one of the greatest movies ever, and then all of a sudden it just gets better when you think it's over. And that is such a classic ending. It's a perfect punchline to the whole movie. So sorry if you haven't seen it, but, you've had some time. I mean, sorry, listeners, you've had some time to see this, but I guess
the statute of limitations for spoilers, I think, expired.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you've gone past the 50-year mark, I think you're good.
As Joe said, it's a perfect film. It's one of the best horror comedies ever. I mean, I'll throw that out there, and I know that sounds very broad, but it really is one of the best horror comedies out there. And it's readily available. It's not one of these things that you have to really search high and dry to find it. No, it's easy to get. So.
Yeah, go get it. I mean, do yourself a favor and just put it, It's so entertaining. And again, when you see, this is Abbott and Costello, it's not them in their prime, but in this movie, it's them in their prime. I mean, for this particular movie, I mean, their career had, peaked at a different time, but man, this is classic Abbott and Costello stuff.
We keep saying that nobody wanted to make the movie, but once they started, they were on, and they gave some of the best performances I think I've seen in any of their movies. I agree. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's just, it brings an added dimension to them. I mean, I love the burlesque routines and how those, who's on first and all those things that come in. But, I mean, you can only do that for so long. And they did a lot on the television show afterward. This just took them to a different part of their career, and it's certainly memorable.
Now, there's another novel out there called Bela Lugosi and the House of Doom by Dwight Kemper. And he's written a series of books. There's 3 of them in this series in which there are some madcap mystery adventures taking place during the production of some of these classic films. The first one, or the second one, the Bela Lugosi and the House of Doom, takes place during the production of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Kemper did an amazing amount of research to pull a lot of the behind the scenes from the production in the movie into the book. And there are some wonderful moments between, I keep saying wonderful, but damn it, that's how this movie makes me feel. There are some wonderful moments between Lugosi and Costello in this book that, while I know never happened, because it's obviously, a novel, it's fiction, I felt like the voice of the characters was right, or they were strong enough that I could imagine these two characters having the conversations that they have about Costello's son's death and Lugosi's feelings about Universal and how he'd been used up by the studio system and forgotten. There are some touching moments in this novel that I believe could have happened.
It sounds like a great read. Yeah,
I would definitely recommend that as well. But not before you all buy the movie or see the movie.
See the movie. Yeah, and there's another one. I mean, some of the things I've been referencing is a book called Abbott and Costello in Hollywood, which kind of breaks down all their films, but some really great behind-the-scenes shots. With the Strange as the Frankenstein monster with Bud's son on his lap, and just this great look on Bud Jr.'s face, and just seeing the kids on the set and some of these and that documentary we talked about as well too. So watch the movie, then go read all about it and read all the behind the scenes stuff. It's some really, really cool things.
And then go watch the movie again.
And then watch it again. Exactly.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you for talking to me about this movie, man. It's been an honor and a privilege because I've been listening to what you do over at the IndieCast for as long as you've been involved in the IndieCast. So, it's been great. This is the first time we've actually chatted, so this has been great for me. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. I mean,
So how do people
it's just I'm sitting in a room talking about it to myself. So at least this makes me not look as crazy being able to talk to other people about it.
How do people find the IndieCast and find what you do?
We got a Facebook page, The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. There's also the IndieCast Facebook page, the IndieCast.com. Its website, the Forcecast is part of the Forcecast, so IndieCast is on iTunes. So check them out. And then if you like Indiana Jones, and especially if you like The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones, the comic book from the Marvel Comics series back in the 80s, shoot myself, Keith, an email at thefurtheradventures@gmail.com, and let us know what your favorite issues are, and we're recapping them and talking to all the people that the artists, the writers, a lot of cool stuff. So we're having some fun with it, just like you are.
They do a great job. They get interviews with these artists and writers and jog their memory about comics that they made 20, 25 years ago. And it's just fascinating discussions that you guys get into over there. So if anybody has even just a passing interest in Indiana Jones, and really you should have more than just a passing interest, but if you have a passing interest in Indiana Jones, you need to check out what they're doing.
Well, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe, for being part of the show, and I can't wait to have you back to talk about something else down the line. And I can't wait to listen to the next installment of The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones over on the IndieCast. There are links to the IndieCast and the Facebook page for The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones over on the website in the show notes for this episode. So head over to monsterkidradio.net, and you'll see the links. Now, this episode is going out on Thursday, and a lot of people may already be on the road to Monster Bash, which is a con that I am not going to this year. I've never been. I've been to cons like Horror Hound Weekend. I've been to places like Crypticon, Norwestcon. I've done Zompire, the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, and CthulhuCon, but I've never been to Monster Bash. Oh, man, and I can't wait until next year because I am trying to find a way to make sure that Monster Kid Radio, or just Derek M. Cook all by myself, I'll leave my podcasting gear at home, will get to Monster Bash 2014. If anybody is headed to Monster Bash, I hope you guys have safe travels going to and coming home from, and I hope you guys have a wonderful time. And if you are going to Monster Bash, or if you're going to any convention for that matter, give us a call from the show. Our voicemail line again, 503-479-5MKR. Let us know how the convention's going. Tell us about your favorite guests. Heck, get one of the guests to call in and leave us a voicemail. We'd love to hear from you from any of the shows out there. On next week's show, I am welcoming Larry Underwood to talk about a John Agar classic. Who's Larry Underwood? Well, y'all might know him better by his horror host name. He is the award-winning Dr. Gain Green. He's going to be on the show to talk about what John Agar film? Tarantula, from director Jack Arnold, Universal, the heyday of big bug monster movies, science fiction monster movies from the 50s. Can't wait to talk about that and share that recording with you guys next week. The week after that, I got something a little different planned. Find us on Facebook, like us on Facebook. I'll announce it there first, and then I'll announce it here on the show next week. Remember, you can also find the band Retroactive Gamma Rays on Facebook. If you have any interaction with them, let them know Monster Kid Radio sent you, and let them know you heard them on this episode of the podcast. Monster Kid Radio is a registered service mark of Monster Kid Radio LLC. All original content of Monster Kid Radio by Monster Kid Radio LLC is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivations 3.0 Unported license. That, of course, does not extend to the song Footprint by the Retroactive Gamma Rays. It appears on their album Activate. It appears on this episode with permission of the band. Talk to everybody next week.